Welcome to 8-Limb Life, a podcast on living the 8 limbs of yoga, one step at a time. My name is Andra, and I am grateful you are sharing your time and presence with me as we explore this sacred wisdom. These teachings are ancient, but they're not meant to live in the past. They show up in how we speak, how we act, how we relate to others, and to ourselves. Each episode explores one of the limbs and how we can bring this wisdom into modern life. This is 8-Limb Life. We often think suffering comes from not having enough. Yoga suggests something more subtle. Suffering can also arise from holding on too tightly. Today we're going to be discussing the final yama, Aparigraha. Aparigraha is often translated as non-grasping or non-possessiveness. But this principle invites us to examine not only what we cling to in our hands, but what we cling to in our minds. Roles, expectations, identities, relationships, or even our own ideas about who we should be. When we feel uncertain, we often reach for something solid. Aparigraha isn't asking us to stop caring. It's asking us to soften our grip. One of the most beautiful stories that illustrates Aparigraha comes from the Taoist tradition. A farmer's horse ran away. The neighbors came and said, "What terrible luck." The farmer replied, "Maybe." A few days later, the horse returned, bringing several wild horses with it. The neighbors said, "What wonderful luck." The farmer replied, "Maybe." Later, the farmer's son was thrown from one of the horses and broke his leg. "What terrible luck," said the neighbors. "Maybe," said the farmer. Soon after, soldiers came through the village to recruit young men for war. Because of the injury, the son was left behind. Again, the neighbors came by. "What wonderful luck." Again, the farmer replied, "Maybe." The story isn't about passivity. It's about recognizing how quickly the mind grasps for certainty, how quickly we want to label experiences as good or bad, success or failure, gain or loss. Aparigraha invites us to release that grip and allow life to unfold before deciding what it means. There was a woman who spent years building a vision of her life. She imagined where she would live, what her work would look like, and perhaps most vividly, the kind of relationship she hoped to have. Over time, the vision became so familiar that it felt less like a possibility and more like a promise. But life unfolded differently. A relationship ended. Plans changed. The future she had so carefully imagined no longer seemed available. And for a long time she focused on what had been lost. But slowly, as the years passed, she noticed something unexpected. The life that emerged in the absence of her original plan contained friendships she didn't expect, experiences she never would have pursued, and a deeper understanding of herself. One day she realized that her greatest suffering had not come from life's change of direction. It had come from grasping on to a particular vision of how her life was supposed to unfold. When she finally loosened her hold on that story, she discovered she hadn't lost her life at all. She had simply made room for a different one. Aparigraha doesn't ask us to stop dreaming or planning. It asks us to remember that our plans are maps, but they're not the territory itself. Sometimes the path that unfolds before us leads somewhere we never would have chosen, and yet, looking back, we wouldn't trade it for the route we originally imagined. When we hold on, when we cling, the body often contracts. The breath becomes shallow. The shoulders tighten. The mind narrows around what it fears losing or what it desperately wants to gain. Practicing Aparigraha creates a different internal experience. The body receives the message that it does not need to constantly defend, control, or secure every outcome. In that sense, non-grasping is not merely a philosophical idea. It is a physiological nervous system experience of greater ease. The Buddha once compared clinging or attachment to carrying a raft. The raft is useful for crossing a river, but once you've reached the other shore, continuing to carry it on your back is unnecessary. The teaching is simple. Even helpful things can become burdens when we refuse to let them go. This could be applied to beliefs, identities, accomplishments, even former versions of ourselves. They each may serve us for a time. Aparigraha asks whether we're still carrying something when it's truly time to let it go. Like water held in cupped hands, life is most available to us when our grip is gentle. Much of yoga points toward this middle way, not indifference, but participation without possession. This can be applied to relationships too. We often think love means holding on, yet many of the tensions in relationships arise when we try to possess what can never truly be possessed: another person's choices, growth, emotions, or even their path. Aparigraha doesn't ask us to love less. It asks us to love with more space, with more freedom, to appreciate people as fellow travelers rather than extensions of ourselves. That naturally leads to an important distinction. Non-grasping is not detachment in the sense of becoming cold or withdrawn. It is remaining fully engaged while releasing the demand that life unfold according to our preferences. Many of us think of attachment as something external. Yet some of our strongest attachments are to the stories we tell about ourselves. I am the successful one. I am the caretaker. I am the athlete. I am the person who was wronged. These identities may contain truth, but over time they can become cages. It might also be worth asking why we grasp in the first place. We might grasp because life is uncertain, or because we experience loss. The mind often believes that if it can hold on tightly enough, it can create permanence. Yet nothing is permanent. Every season passes. Every experience rises and falls like a wave returning back to the ocean. So Aparigraha asks, who am I without this story? One of the central teachings in a very important yogic text, the Bhagavad Gita, speaks directly to Aparigraha. We are entitled to our actions, it says, but not to the fruits of our actions. Because once an action leaves us, countless factors influence the outcome. Consider a musician who spent weeks writing and recording a song. After releasing it online, he began to check the views obsessively. First there are 100, then 200, 500, but it wasn't enough. The creativity, the joy he felt while writing the song began to disappear, and suffering began to arise. The suffering didn't come from making the music. It came from his attachment to how it was received. The creation brought him alive. The grasping came after. The Bhagavad Gita invites another approach. Give yourself to the work, then loosen your grip on the outcome. Let the action be an offering rather than an expectation. This may be one of the most practical expressions of Aparigraha in modern life. Parent wholeheartedly, love wholeheartedly, create wholeheartedly, practice with your whole heart, and then let go. A leaf does not cling to the branch forever. Rivers do not grasp yesterday's water. Nature seems to understand something we often forget. Life moves through cycles of receiving and releasing. Aparigraha invites us to participate in that same rhythm, to enjoy what is here now, to appreciate what arrives without fearing its departure, to trust that letting go is not always about loss. Sometimes it is simply making room for what comes next. Next week, we will shift from the yamas to the niyamas. While the yamas are often considered outward-facing, the niyamas are more inward. Until then, I invite you to consider, in the spirit of Aparigraha, if I am not my possessions, my accomplishments, my roles, or my stories, then who am I? Thank you for sharing your time and presence with me, exploring the 8-limb life. My name is Andra, and I look forward to connecting with you more deeply with each and every episode. If you'd like to stay for an additional reading, I will share one at the end of each episode. May joy, love, peace, and laughter fill your lives and the lives of those around you. Namaste. I'd like to share the 9th sutra from the Tao Te Ching. This has been one of the most important spiritual texts in my own journey. This interpretation is by Stephen Mitchell. Fill your bowl to the brim, and it will spill. Keep sharpening your knife, and it will blunt. Chase after money and security, and your heart will never unclench. Care about people's approval, and you will be their prisoner. Do your work, then step back. The only path to serenity.